像头等一下像头的，像头的说的。
Hi, I'm Kate Wingrove, Training and Development Director with Toastmasters International. Online meetings are becoming an increasingly popular way to connect, whether in your Toastmasters club, at work, or just as a way to connect with friends. Here are a few tips to follow as you participate in an online meeting. Test your technology. It's always a good idea to set up and test your technology before the meeting starts. Make sure your camera, headphones or speakers, and microphone are all working before your meeting, not during. We recommend joining meetings early, especially if you're going to speak during them, for just this reason. Eliminate noise. If possible, join online meetings while sitting in a quiet space. Before the meeting starts, try and eliminate any noises that may be distracting, including silencing your phone. Your microphone may pick up background noise, and that can be a major distraction for other meeting participants. Mute your microphone. To take the previous tip a step further, we recommend muting your microphone whenever you aren't speaking. This simple step is an easy way to guarantee that background noises, movements, breathing, or other sounds don't distract from whoever is currently speaking. When it's your turn to speak, just remember to unmute your microphone. Make eye contact with your camera. Eye contact is an important part of any speech, and it's something that people struggle with when meeting online. The best way to mimic eye contact online is to focus on your webcam and not your screen or anything else around you. If it helps, you can make this fun by attaching googly eyes or a smiley face to your webcam. Think about your background. If there is anything in your background that may be distracting, try and move it before the meeting. Some online meeting platforms allow you to blur your background, while others allow you to change it altogether. These are both good options to hide what otherwise might distract speakers and fellow meeting participants. Use proper lighting. If you're going to be on camera during an online meeting, it's important to make sure others can see you. To ensure that happens, work in a well-lit room and avoid having any lights point directly at your camera. Treat it like any other meeting. Online meetings may be awkward at times, but behaving as you normally would in person will make it less so. Dress, speak, and behave like you would during any other meeting, and you'll be just fine. If you wouldn't do it during an in-person meeting, don't do it in an online one. Follow these tips and you'll be contributing to successful online meetings in no time.
Okay, Pak Isyam, kita boleh mula. Alright, A'udzubillahi minasyaitonirrajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum dan selamat datang. Welcome everyone. Apa khabar semua? Thank you very much for participating and registering and joining this webinar today. Today, the 20th of April. Very blessed day we have here in 8th day of Ramadan. Alhamdulillah. So my name Khairul Anwar bin Ibrahim. From the Center of Academic Excellence or KAIS Scholarship. And before we begin, untuk mendapat keberkatan, kita mulakan majlis kita dengan kitab Al-Fatihah. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. Iyyaka na'budu. Alhamdulillah, syukur pada Allah SWT kerana memberi kita peluang dan ruang untuk kita bersama pada hari ini. So we'll conduct our session here in English, or maybe some part in Malay also. So first off, I would like to thank you again for joining the session, and I thank you again, Dr. Yudaria from UTM, for again joining us in this session training called Evaluation of a Test Item, Part 2. Okay, so again, we thank you so much and welcome Dr. Yuda. Alhamdulillah, she is here again today.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So just a little housekeeping before for those who just joined in. Kita ada lebih kurang 36 right now. I think there are still more to come. I saw about 80 plus registration today. So if you wish to talk, if you want to turn on your video for a short while just to see some of your faces, feel free to do so. After that, when we start, is enough. All right, so please mute your mic to avoid any distraction as usual. If you have any question during presentation, please kindly raise your hand and type them in the chat box, the WebEx control panel. I bring them up in the presentation, and we also have Q&A time towards the end. So this session will be broken into two parts. First part and the second part, both will be conducted by Dr. Yuda and assisted by Puan Mitra. Mitra is a postgraduate student in UTM. And then in between, we will have sort of like not coffee break lah. It's a stretching break. Okay. By the way, we also have a participant, Prof. Anand. Thank you very much for joining here. One professor here joining us also. And then, okay, recorded session we will be available in Facebook, YouTube, as well as our KAIS website, as well as the presentation slides. I also emailed the presentation site for those who have registered through your email this morning. So you can print out the notes and take notes while lecture. So please enjoy, relax, and pay close attention to the presenter. For those who just joining us, who didn't manage to join the first session, let me introduce you to Dr. Daria. Her name is Dr. Daria Muhammad Yusof. Is a former associate professor at the Department of Mathematical Science, University Technology Malaysia, UTM. She received her Master of Science in Mathematics from University of Leeds, UK, and PhD from University of Warwick, UK. So currently, she attached with the Center of Engineering Education, CEE, UTM, and largely engaged in the work related to enhancing engineering education. Her focus of interest include the mathematical education of prospective engineers and teachers, teaching and learning strategies, and assessment of learning. She has written and published in areas such as mathematical thinking, integration of technology, mathematical competency, and mathematics at the workplace. Over the years, she has been actively involved in conducting various workshops in mathematical thinking, active learning, outcome-based education, OBE, and assessment student of learning. Okay, so now time is 9:10 a.m. So without further ado, we will turn the session over to our presenter. So Dr. Yudaria, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Hairul. Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and good morning, everyone.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
So, welcome to the session. Right, so this is part 2 of the workshop on constructing an evaluation of test items. So, as mentioned by Dr. Hairul, so there will be two parts, two sessions of this part 2. So session 1, I'm going to pick up again from where we stopped in part 2, in part 1, and then continue from there. Okay, and we're going to stop, I think, about 10 minutes for the stretching, for coffee break for those who are not fasting, and continue with session 2 on the rubrics. Okay, so this is the slide. So let me slideshow. Right. So with me is Mitra. So Mitra is from the School of Electrical Engineering and also an associate fellow at the Center for Engineering Education, UTM. Okay, so session 1 will be using revised Bloom's taxonomy to create and evaluate test items. So this is the intended learning outcomes. So hopefully at the end of this session, you can use the RBT, okay, to create test items as well as to evaluate your exam questions or your test items that you had created. Right, so this is the first activity. Okay, so we're going to go to menti.com. So use the code 92693649. Just challenge yourself what you know about tests and examination. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing and pass it to Mitra to show you the menti.com. So you just use your handphone to go to menti.com and put in the code 92693649. Okay, Mitra, can you show the menti.com? Boleh hide dulu kat Mitra. Can hide the response. Okay, so it's only 2% so far. So we're going to set the timer. So we've got 1 minute to answer this question. It is only 11, 12 people so far. And you got 9, 7. It's countdown now. Mitra mungkin boleh extend another 30 seconds to give more people chance to respond. Okay, everyone, try to answer the question, challenge yourself. See if you can define what test is, and there's another question later on exam. Okay, so we have 20 participants so far responding to this question. Okay, so for 22 responses, so what do we have? Right, so 64% says it's comprehensive and 36% is something that is limited in scope. Okay, I'm going to reserve my response as of now because we're going to go for the second question. Okay, so this is an examination can be defined as, so this is also an objective question. Okay, so we have set the timer to 1 minute. Okay, only 25 participants have responded so far. Just use your handphone, go to menti.com and then put in the code 92693649. Okay, can we look at the results? Okay, so 92%, okay, and there's 8% says all of the above, right? So you can see actually from these two questions, okay, there should be some, you can okay, you can actually distinguish or discriminate between test and exam. Okay, so exam should be comprehensive, okay, as the 92% of the participants says, and test should be somewhat limited in scope. Okay, so when you know the difference in definition between tests and exams, then when you create the test items, okay, so it will give you an indication that when you create test items for tests, like mid-semester tests, then you should not put items that are of high level, because as you know that is limited in scope, and also the time is only about maybe 1 hour or 1 hour 15 minutes at most. So most of the time we only put in low order questions, or the highest we can put is up to level 4. That's the highest we can put, because otherwise it will be too much pressure for the students to answer within a limited time. Right. Thank you, Mitra. Okay, so I hope you can also distinguish. Actually, you should able to distinguish between quiz questions, okay, test question, and exam questions. So there should be some differences between those three. Right. So that's actually the answer just now. So test can be defined as, the answer should be A, something that is limited in scope. Okay, focus on specific course material, and examination is a comprehensive form of assessment that is normally given at the end of the semester. So it's a summative kind of assessment. So test can be formative. It can also be summative. Okay? That means you grade, but at the same time, when you receive back or you give back the manuscript to students, you might want to give some feedback, okay, depending on the errors or the mistakes that have made, and you don't want them to repeat the same mistake again in the final exam. So what makes a test good or bad? Okay, of course, the answer is good test measures what you want, and bad test do not. Right. So so in terms of constructing test items, actually lecturers place two opposite roles. Okay, call that opposite roles, as one as gatekeeper and the other one as coaches. So you can see that we are actually playing two contrasting role. Okay, one is we want to set and maintain the standards to ensure students are qualified to enter the community of professional practice. And at the same time, we also want to help students meet and surpass the standards. Okay, now since examination is the heart of both functions, so we have to make sure we fulfill the gatekeeper role by making our test comprehensive and rigorous. And at the same time, okay, we need to ensure that students are graded fairly, okay, to satisfy our mission as coaches by doing our best to prepare the students for meeting the outcomes. Right, so these are 7 tips that I'm going to share with you from Felder, okay, on preparing test items. Okay, so the first is test on what you teach. That's what he said, no surprises. That means students are prepared, okay, for the assessment task. So in this case, the test or exams that you want to give.
Sorry, excuse me, Dr. Yuda. Sorry mengganggu. Kita boleh tak gunakan macam laser pointer ke untuk show where the text yang you are referring to? Because ada participant request that you put sort of pointer. Yeah, thank you very much. Sorry for the
Right. So I'm going to on the pointer. Okay. Switch. Check. I think I need to go out from the.
Ketiga, you just right click
Yeah.
on the screen tu, flight tu, and there are satu option tu untuk pointer. Just right click.
Right.
Click there, and then the other pointer option tu will pop up.
Okay, because I don't have a mouse actually.
Okay, but ambil right click you pakai ni punya.
Right click there.
Yes, there you go. There is a pointer option.
Laser pointer.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you very
So
much.
thank you. Right. Okay. So, sorry for the interruption. Right. So the first tip is you need to prepare the students. Okay. Remember that we are assessing the students on something that we expect them to have, the skills as well as the knowledge. Okay, so it's not fair to the students if we give questions or we test them with something that they are not prepared with, right? So that's the tip number one. Okay, so tip number two is you need to provide study guide. Make the expectation explicit and visible to the students. Okay, so you need to promote high expectation to be achieved. That means providing study guides doesn't mean that we are giving them the questions. It's just making explicit your expectation. What is it that you want students to be able to demonstrate during the exams or during the tests? Okay, in terms of the skills and the knowledge. So tip number three is you need to minimize speed as a factor of performance. Okay, so you need to assess whether the students know how to solve the problem or not without necessarily had to provide the entire detailed solution with limited time. Remember from the last workshop, Felder also had give a sort of like a template or a generic problem on how you can create effective questions without involving the students to do the crunching of the calculation. Okay, so instead, because we just want to assess students know, okay, and what they can do with what they know. Okay? So if you are giving a functioning type of questions, right? So we are not going to look at the detailed calculation. So maybe we can do that in the assignment, okay? Such as giving them projects or the problem-based questions and so on, right? So that is actually tip number 7. So we come to that later, right? So work out your test exam from scratch. Okay, so we need to we need to treat creating questions just like we prepare reports or when we draft. Okay, so we need to edit. Okay, we need to draft and redraft because flaws is unavoidable. Okay, sometimes when we think that everything is perfect, but there are bound to be some maybe typo error or even something that we have missed out, and we don't want during the exam to make announcement to say that we need to insert something or maybe the sentence is incomplete and matters like that. Okay, so we need to avoid the flaws. Okay. And then we need to set independent multiple parts problems. So what that means is, if you remember in the previous, for those of you who have attended the part 1, so there are various formats of questions. So number 5 is actually referring to the outcome audit. Okay, the audit outcome question. That means break the questions into several parts rather than giving it into one big paragraph. Okay, which sometimes may cause confusion and also ambiguity, right? So it's for it to be easy for the students to see the question. So sometimes it's better to break it into parts. Okay, maybe part 1, part 2, part 3. So the parts doesn't mean that if they couldn't answer part 1, okay, it will affect part 2. So you need to make it the question in a way that it is not dependent on each other. Okay? So that means part 1 normally is an easy part, and part 2 maybe you increase the complexity. Okay, so you can even use this type of questions to discriminate between the A students from the average students. Okay, so that's what number 6 says. Okay, allocate 10 to 15% for determining A grade students. Okay, so the question that you create should be able to discriminate excellent students from the average or the poor students. Okay, so 10 to 15% is actually why is that amount allocated? Because that is actually the difference between the A and the B. Okay, normally it's about 10 to 15%. Now, be generous in tests or exam, but strict in assignments. Okay, so this is what actually follows from number 3. Okay, when you say in exam, less accuracy on number crunching, but in assignment, we can be very strict on that. Okay, because they have students normally have plenty of time to complete the assignment. Okay, maybe in terms of projects or in terms of reports. So they have plenty of time. So we can be strict on the calculation and accuracy of results. Right. So this is also something that I had picked up from the previous session. Okay. So the only way people acquire skills is through practice and feedback. Is what as advocated by Felder and Brand. And the best way to facilitate the development of higher level skills is to include this type of tasks in the learning outcomes. Okay. Share them with students in study guides for exams. Okay, give illustration and practice in class and more practice on assignment, and then put the high level questions on the exams. So this is actually referring to tips number 1. That means you, and also tips on number 3, I think, on giving them the guide. Okay, so students are actually well prepared for the questions that we are going to test them on. Right, so the key points to remember in the test development, okay, or test items development, you need to spend enough time developing tests, quiz, and exams. Okay, remember these 3 terms, okay, that sometimes we use interchangeably, but actually there are differences between the 3. When you're talking about quiz questions, test questions, and exam questions, there should be some differences between the type of questions that we pose. Okay, so exam normally is summative. Okay, because now that's what we give at the end of the semester, while test and quiz can be both. It can be formative as well as summative. So if you are not sure between the 2 terms, okay, so you may need to revise again. Okay, so basically the difference is that summative is for grading. The purpose is for grading. Okay, and formative is for learning. Okay, or as learning. That means it can be used to for the students to monitor their progress, okay, as well as for the lecturers, okay, to monitor or to use it as a feedback on the effectiveness of the teaching. Okay. But at the same time, we also want to give grades. Okay. So that's when I said that test and quiz can be both formative and summative. Okay, and make sure that your test content matches the learning outcomes and the teaching learning activities. Okay, remember that when we create assessment tasks, okay, the learning outcomes is the main reference. Okay, the basis of how we create or what question that we had created depends on the learning outcomes that we have. And teaching learning activities is referring to the how we prepare the students. Okay, in terms of the learning activities as well as the teaching. Okay. And it's important for tests to have good content validity. That means we have to make sure that the questions that we are giving is valid in terms of the language, in terms of the content, in terms of the technical, or in terms of the knowledge matter itself. Okay, the subject matter itself. So we have to make sure that those are valid and use different testing methods. Don't just focus on one type of questions. So it's good to have a multiple choice questions maybe, or some essay questions, or even different types of exams like take home or open book exam, group testing. So if you have not tried group testing, okay, you can do pair testing and you can see the effects on the students. Okay, so perhaps most of the time we think that testing or giving quiz, tests, and exams should only be done individually. Sometimes you can also do it in pairs or even in groups. Okay, so but it depends on how you monitor, on how you control, okay, this type of testing. And right question to address things other than recall. Okay, so it's like as Felder advocates or suggests that we need to put higher order questions in the exams. Okay, not just focusing on the low order. Okay, now recap again the RBT. Yeah,
Okay,
any
Assalamualaikum
question?
Dr. Ida. There is
Yeah,
one question.
salam.
Is it okay to interrupt during the session? No problem.
Yeah,
Huh?
sure. Yeah.
Okay, there is a question by Shahrizan. What do you mean by being generous in test or exam? Can you give some example and giving simple example questions, not too rigid during marking, or give tips prior to students? In the chat, if you can read the question in the chat.
Chat.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Can you repeat the question again? Yeah.
What do you mean by be generous in test or exam?
Okay.
Is it giving a simple and easy questions, or is it not too rigid during working, or give tips or prior to students?
Okay. So what we meant there is during exams we don't focus too much on the calculation or the number crunching, because we know that complicated calculations is time consuming, right? So rather than focusing on the calculation, perhaps you may want to ask a question that uh, check whether students understood perhaps what the equation is representing. Okay, the equation, or they know what the difference between the variables, or which one is the constant, okay, or something of that nature, right? So, but you can test the calculation during assignment. Okay, like if you give a project, or do you give a report, or something that the students need to do in groups. Okay, so by being stringent, that means you are really strict on the algebraic manipulation, for example, on the computational methods. Okay, so that's where you test the actual calculation, okay, rather than testing it during exams. Okay, because you know that we have a 2-hour paper or 3-hour paper, we don't want to spend, say, one question 40 minutes just to see a complete calculation. Okay, so that's what it meant. And giving guides, that means normally we give guides at the beginning of the semester. Okay, we prepare the guides. That means we have already stated or make it explicit the type of questions that we're going to come up during the exams or even the tests. Okay, so you may even give some examples if you like, but most of the time it's just giving tips like the skills that are going to be tested, you know, your expectation, okay, in terms of like you are actually looking at accuracy, or you are looking at the facts or something of that nature. Okay, and if you want, you can also give some examples of questions, just maybe like tutorial questions, okay, but selected questions that focus on the type of question that will appear in the test or in the exam, that is representative. Okay, so it doesn't mean that the same question will come out. It's just representing your expectation to the students. Okay, so hope that will answer your question. Okay, so I'm going to continue with the RBT, the revised Bloom taxonomy. As you can see, there are 2 dimensions as compared to the original Bloom. There's only 1 dimension. So we have the cognitive dimension on the upper row. Okay, so you have the 6 levels. Okay, from remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, and create. Okay, and then on the left handmost column here is the knowledge dimension. Okay, so based on this one, we have the knowledge. These are actually the types of knowledge. Okay, so we have the factual knowledge, the conceptual knowledge, the procedural knowledge, and the metacognitive knowledge. Okay, so if you found that this is too complicated, okay, because sometimes people, when they see too many dimensions, okay, or too something new, is very difficult to digest. So you can just think of the knowledge as 2 types. So we have the declarative knowledge and we have the functioning knowledge. Okay, so declarative knowledge is actually the knowing, okay, the information that you can convey, okay, you can declare, okay, as compared to the functioning knowledge, which is actually referred to the intellectual skills or the knowledge that is put to use, okay, to solve problems, to reason, or to create products or something. Okay, and often also include the psychomotor and the cognitive strategies. Okay. So it's actually similar to this one. we have the factual, conceptual, procedural, metacognitive. So most of the time, the factual and conceptual are actually declarative knowledge, and procedural and metacognitive are the functioning knowledge. Right. So the taxonomy table, okay, you can use it as a blueprint, okay, for your text. Normally, when we need to create some sort of like a table of justification, okay, or table of specification, the TOS. So we can actually use this table also, okay, to plan, okay, the test or the questions that we want to create for the test or even the quiz and the exams. Okay, and you can see the coverage, okay, whether it's balanced. Are we in terms of the complexity? So are we only focusing on the lower order? Okay, so is it spread out? Okay, so that's actually the advantage of using this taxonomy table as the test blueprint, because it represents, okay, the alignment of the, remember the three aspects or the three elements, the outcomes, the assessment here is the test items, and also the teaching learning activities, because teaching learning activities should also use the same verb as the one in the assessment task. If the assessment task say able to analyze, then our teaching learning activities should also focus on analyze. Okay, so that's what it meant when you use this table. So the picking up again from the revised blue taxonomy, so you have the types of knowledge being learned and the cognitive process being employed. So these are the knowledge dimension, and then we have the cognitive process. Okay, so basically so basically in terms of the RBT, okay, it describes the types of thinking needed to interact with the information during an activity, and that gives us also the information on the kinds of knowledge that can be tested. So what we can test are the factual knowledge, the conceptual knowledge, the procedural knowledge, and the metacognitive knowledge. So there are these what we meant by factual knowledge are basically the terminology, you know, the facts, the figures. Conceptual knowledge are the principles, the theories, you know, the frameworks. And procedural knowledge refers to the algorithm, the techniques, okay, the methods of calculation, and so on. And metacognitive knowledge is referring to knowledge on self. Okay, self-knowledge, knowing how you know, the strategy, okay, something that like learning styles or the strategy of problem solving, those are all actually referring to metacognitive knowledge. That means knowledge that helps you to control or to monitor, okay, your learning. So this is an example of the PBQ, the problem-based questions. Okay, so just to pick up from the kinds of knowledge tested. So I just give you one example. Okay, more examples were given in the previous session. Okay, so if you want to refer to the types of questions, you can look at part 1 of the workshop. So this is just the problem-based questions. So why we go for this question? Because it normally triggers higher order thinking abilities. Okay, so the question developed from scenarios, okay, depict aspects of problem relevant to students' level of training, and it can also use to represent the attributes that we want students to have. Okay, so we can use this type of question to test the higher order, like reasoning, analytic reasoning, the problem-solving skills, the decision-making abilities, okay, and so on. And it also represent real life situation. So it can be very simple to a complex, authentic case. Okay, so that's why we need to go for this type of question rather than the low order. Okay, so just to remind again, when we are doing assessment, okay, so what we are actually assessing is the learning outcome. Okay, so although we are grading the task, in essence, we are actually assessing the learning outcomes. That is how well students do in the learning outcomes. Okay, so the verb can be explained, solve, create, and so on, and not how well the students do in the assessment task. Okay, so assessment task is just giving us the evidence, okay, of whether we have achieved the outcomes. Okay, so it just giving us the data that tell us that the learning outcomes have been achieved or how well the students have achieved the outcomes. Okay. So, but when we do assessment, what we are assessing is actually the learning outcomes. Okay, so that's why well-formulated outcomes actually help to point us to the level of analysis, okay, and also determine the methods, okay, the interpretation of the evidence and the use of information. So in later in the coming slides, I'm going to illustrate some of this, what we meant by, based on the learning outcomes, you can identify, okay, the methods of assessment as well as on the interpretation of evidence. Right. So this is an example. So suppose you have your learning outcome that says students will be able to explain how the normal curve serve as a statistical model. Okay. Now you aim to construct or to prepare a constructed response item. So constructed response item means it can be an essay, it can be a short response question, okay, of that nature. Okay. And you want to elicit the type of behavior you want to measure. Okay. The verb there is explain. Okay. So the constructed response items can be briefly explain how the normal curve serve as a statistical model for estimation and hypothesis testing. Okay, so you can see that these questions is actually assessing the outcomes. Okay, so this is a very simple one. Okay, so explain here, okay, it depends on explain can be in level 2, it can also be in level 5 or in level 4 of the Bloom, so depending on your expectation actually. Okay. So for this case, if you look at the question, okay, when you post such questions, so this will fall in level 4, okay, because you are expecting the students to analyze, okay, between the different types of statistical model. Okay, so evaluating questions. Okay, so please read the following draft. So maybe you have a different background, but I think this question is quite simple to understand, okay, regardless of your background. Okay. So think for a while, okay, whether the suitability of the test items in the way it is written. Okay, so think on your own. Okay. What can you improve? Okay. So look at the questions. If you as a student were given such question, how do you feel? Okay, so you can see that the question is actually not written in a very good manner. Okay, why I say that? Because it can cause confusion. Okay, it can cause ambiguity because there are too many questions. Okay, too many questions in one paragraph. Okay, let me show you. So you have described here and how and where, there's another, and how, and at the bottom there's another questions. Okay, so this is actually is considered a badly written question. Okay, so we need to edit. So that's why one of the tips now says that you need to create the question from scratch. Okay, then you can see the flaws. Okay. So how can we simplify these questions, make it simpler for the students? Okay. So in this case, perhaps you may want to reduce, okay, or you want to break the question into ordered outcomes rather than putting everything into one paragraph. Okay. So you can actually break the questions into several parts, okay, so that it's obvious or it's clear to the students what they need to do. Okay. So this is an example, okay, how the question has been edited and be accepted for the examination. So it becomes simpler. Okay, so this becomes part A, and then you have part B. Okay, so basically, what this question wants the students to do, it can be simplified into just simple sentences and not make it very wordy. Okay, so that's actually the message. The editing the exam questions, you need to edit it. Okay, because you are bound to make mistakes. Perhaps you want to ask your colleague to read it for clarity. Okay? And then if the questions, okay, are full of mistakes, okay, and create confusion, you are actually destroying the validity of the exam. Okay, so treat writing exams as you would any other important writing project. So you need to draft and redraft. So it's not one-off. Writing test items is not one-off mission. It can take several times. Okay, maybe 2-3 times for you to edit the questions. Right. How much time? Okay, so I would like everybody to think about. Suppose you are planning a 2-hour exam paper and you plan to give 30 questions in the multiple choice. So you have, say, part A is a multiple choice questions and part B is the problem-based questions. And it's worth 50% of the overall exam grade. So how long do you expect students to spend on each multiple choice questions? So do you know how to calculate or how to actually put the timing? So the exam is taking 2 hours. Okay, the paper on the whole is a 2-hour paper. So you have one section that constitute of multiple choice questions, and you plan to create 30 questions. And this section is worth 50% of the overall exam grade. So suppose you are grading the exam as 100%. So this section is 50%. So how long do you expect students to spend on each MCQ?
Okay, sorry to interrupt.
Just think on your own. Yeah, if anybody would like to, yes, that would be fine. If you want to give, just unmute yourself and you can talk.
We usually,
if you have any.
give 1.5 minutes for each question.
Okay.
Doctor,
Yeah.
nak tanya. I think I have a question lah. On the fundamental of multiple choice questions, what we being taught is that if the class is actually, if the exam being taken as a physical examination in the hall, so one multiple choice question equal to 1.5 minutes.
1.5 minutes.
But I read somewhere it stated that if the multiple choice question being conducted online, it should be cut shorter than that. Is that true? Because I'm a bit confused about with that.
What is the difference doing the question online and on paper?
Yeah, on the MCQ. Because
in terms of reading the question, reading the question, does it take less time reading it online compared to reading it on paper?
because of this, I read somewhere it said that when the multiple choice question is being conducted through online, there's a certain rule that actually is being taken back from the normal conventional rules. For example, like the question has to be sequential. The student cannot turn back into the previous questions and so on. So and also to minimize the what we call it the cheating. So I heard somewhere, I read somewhere, I forgot where it is, but they say that actually
if you are doing it online, if you are doing it online, it is possible to control that by just giving one question, like you said, sequential. One question appear at a time. But then I think in terms of the time taken, it shouldn't be shorter. It shouldn't be shorter because the time the student takes to read the question, I think it doesn't matter whether it's online or on paper.
Right.
Okay.
So basically,
in fact,
terms of how,
the reading.
So basically, in terms of how long actually the exam is going to be is exactly the same as the normal one, isn't it? So 1.5.
Exactly. Yes. Okay. It just maybe when it's online, you can control the cheating. Because you can make the question appear one at a time. Okay, but coming back to this original question, so suppose so this is a simple rule, thumb of rule we can say, right? So if the question is 50% worth and you have 30 questions, okay, so you can actually say within a 2-hour exam. So for the MCQ, okay, we should not spend more than 1 hour. Okay, The reason being is worth 50%. Okay, so the total grade there is going to be 100%. So if this section is going to be worth 50%, that means we are expecting, okay, the student to spend at least or no more than 1 hour. Okay, and they need to cover 30 questions in 60 minutes. So basically, a simple calculation shows that one question will take them about 2 minutes. Okay. Now, of course, this is just a simple rule of thumb. So it also depends on the complexity of the question, because sometimes when you put a slightly higher order question, you expect the students to spend a little bit more. Okay, but this is actually on average. Okay, so one question will be taking about 2 minutes of the student's time. Right, so you're going to do some work here. Okay, so you can go to menti.com. Okay, put in the code 794115692690. Sorry. So the code is 79415690. So you go to menti.com and you have two questions. So the question is still referring to just a simple question actually. So you have part A and part B of the questions, and it's asking you how much time do students have to answer the questions in a 3-hour paper, and what is this type of question asking students to demonstrate. So I'm going to stop sharing and let Mitra show the menti.com. Okay, just use your handphone, okay, and put in the code 79415690. Okay, challenge yourself. So how much time do students have to answer the question in a 3-hour paper? So you have part A of the question is 4 marks and part B of the question is 6 marks. Okay, in total, the question is carrying 10 marks.
Dr. Yuda, sorry to interrupt. So if we, okay, this is the other question. So somebody asked that, so how about the answer scheme? Should we think the time depends on how much the answers that the student should write, or it's just based on the question?
Okay, so there are actually other factors, but then considering just if you have the number of questions allocated, okay, and given the time that you have, okay, so that's just an average, okay, an average. So one question will, you can actually calculate the question based on the number of time that you have. But as I said just now, it depends also on the complexity of the questions. So perhaps one question may only take about 1 minute, okay, not even 2 minutes, okay. But considering the time or the length of the paper is 2 hours, okay. So and the marks allocated there is 50%. So our expectation as the assessor is that you do not want student to spend more than 1 hour at that particular section, considering the marks is only 50%. Okay, so they have another 50% more.
Okay, right. Okay, the voting now is closed.
Yeah. Okay, so only 17 participants. The Menti is not open. Mitra, can you extend the time so that there are still some participants who did not manage to enter menti.com? Okay, so you have, it's now open, so you can try answering the questions. So the question is worth 10 marks, okay, and the paper is a 3-hour paper. So how much time do you expect students to spend answering this question? Okay, so we have more people managed to enter menti.com. Okay, so time's up. So let's see the response. Okay, so some say 6 minutes, some say 24 minutes. Okay, but if you follow the rule of thumb as I illustrated before, okay, so 3-hour paper means you have 180 minutes. Okay, 180 minutes. So this in terms of marks, 180 minutes for 100 marks. Okay, so this is a 10 marks question. So that means within for 1 mark, okay, 1 mark, it will take 1.8 minutes. Okay, 1.8 minutes for students to get 1 mark. Okay, so for 10 marks, that means it will take them 18 minutes. Okay, so that's actually just a simple rule of thumb. Of course, if you want to be more precise, okay, you can actually, there's another tips that says, depends on how long you as the examiner, you as the assessor, write the answer. How long does it take for you to write the answer? Okay, so if you take say 10 minutes, okay, for you to write the answer, that means students should have 3 times of that. Okay, so there's also some suggestion that says the length of time or the duration of time students will take to answer a question is 3 times. Okay, you as the assessor or you as the creator of the question take to write down the answer. But then this is just another way of indicating. Okay, so it depends on the length of paper and also the marks allocated. So that also can give you an indication of the time taken. Because for 10 marks, okay, so it will take about 18 minutes. Okay. That is the another tips that you can use. Okay, so the next question. So the right answer there is 18 minutes. So what is this type of question asking a student to demonstrate? This is actually asking the level, the Bloom's level, the cognitive level of the question. So although there's 2 parts, A and B, but both of the questions are actually of the same level.
The data is Menti still open Ke dah tak nampak timer dia.
Mitra ke ni extend the timer?
Now we have 23 participants. Okay, it's
Yeah.
increasing.
Right. So hopefully more people can try. Okay, what level is this question? Okay, so the question is asking briefly explain the concept, and the part B is define the steps for performing a life cycle assessment. Okay, so 28 people have managed to respond to these questions. Okay, so let's look at the answer. Okay, so congratulations to the 86%. Right, so the answer is actually understanding. Okay, so it's understanding type of or the level of cognitive that is understanding. It's just the question is basically part A is explaining the concept. So that's actually a conceptual. Okay? If you are looking at the dimension, so it's conceptual, but the level is understanding. Define the steps for performing, that is actually a procedural type of knowledge, but the level of cognitive is understanding. But the types of knowledge between the two are not the same. So part A is actually a conceptual knowledge and part B is procedural. Okay, so thank you, Mitra. All right, so I'm going to continue with the slides. Okay, so you have answered this. Right, so I'm going to recap this activity again because based on previous response, so some says that there is no answer to this question. So I'm going to recap this and I'm going to give you another similar question for you to try. Okay, because this question is actually looking at both, okay, looking at the cognitive as well as the knowledge. Okay, the kind of knowledge that that's being tested and the cognitive process being assessed. Okay, and then you have to map the questions onto the taxonomy table so that you can see the balance. Okay, is it balanced? So define a computer base. So this is actually a factual question in terms of the knowledge. It's factual and okay, it's a level 1. Okay, so that's actually all the answer there. So explain, so that's conceptual, and the level is C2. That means this is understanding. Okay, so relate. Okay, characteristics to a database package. So you can see that there is some techniques or some algorithm involved. So that's procedural type of knowledge, and the level is C3 because it's just asking you to relate. So just application and compare the database. So this is again procedural in terms of knowledge. The level is C4 because the verb there is compare, and then suggest this is going to be C5 because okay, although the suggest can be actually question 5 is can be a little bit confusing because just by looking at the first verb you think that this is going to be in C6. But actually, if you read through the questions, okay, it says here decide. Okay, decide whether to use. So the question is actually asking, okay, to decide. So that's actually why it falls in C5. Evaluate, okay, rather than C6. Okay. So suggest a criteria that can be used to decide. So it's a procedural type of knowledge, but it is level 5. Right. So when you place the questions on the taxonomy table, so you can see that okay, in terms of whether it's balanced, it's somewhat balanced in terms of the complexity, but the coverage, okay, so you have none here at the metacognitive. So perhaps you may want, if you are, if you have this type of coverage, so you may want to consider perhaps thinking about creating a metacognitive type of question, and also maybe going to level 6. Okay, so this is the questions that you're going to do. So I think this question is pasted on Jamboard. So I'm going to let Mitra first briefly explain how to use the Jamboard and then how to use this question or how to answer this question in the Jamboard. Because you're going to paste this question as well. Oh, sorry, there's already the answer. So you're going to paste the question in the taxonomy table. Right. So Mitra, can you share the Jamboard and explain a little bit on how to use the Jamboard? I think this is no breakout room, so the Jamboard will be can be accessed by all of you. Okay, but the question will be pasted there. So Jamboard is just a virtual whiteboard by Google. There are also other virtual whiteboards available, like the Padlets and the Microsoft Teams. In Microsoft Teams also we have the virtual whiteboard. So, but the one that we are using here is the Jamboard by Google. So it's free. The apps is actually free.
Okay, for Mitra, I just click on the link just now. And I think the website required to request an access
sorry.
from you. Yes.
Yeah, I
Okay,
have.
maybe you can make it
Hold
open
on.
access. Access.
Yeah.
Anyone.
Anyone.
Okay.
Okay.
It's the same link, right? Or different link?
Hold on. I'll try and paste the new link. See if you can access that.
Okay.
Okay. Maybe Pamitra can brief the participant on how to
Yeah.
use this Jamboard very, very quickly. Maybe.
Okay, so this Jamboard is usually used if you have you have different breakout sessions or teams of students to discuss on the same material. So like what I have done here, I've made the same layout. Sorry, if you add from frame number 1 until frame number 7, it's all the same. So for example, if I have like 7 teams, so I have the same layout, then I want each team to go to each frame. So they will be working on the same frame. So, and at the same time, I can look at what they are working on, and at the same time, the other teams also can browse through and see what the other teams are doing. So
Okay,
here,
Pamitra, sorry. When I open the second link, they kata you can only view this document. To make changes, have to ask the owner for ID access.
I'll try again.
Okay. So dia kata kena request ID access and you have to send and then you to approve. So maybe.
Oh, okay. This one have to be
Yeah.
edited. Okay. So this is always what happens lah. So whenever I do the Jamboard, so make sure that if you want students to access this and do some editing, we need to change. Make sure that share the link, anyone with the link here, and then choose the role as editor. So like what I did just now is only you can access, but you can only view it.
Okay, so I think we learned something new here. For those who are here, we can maybe start using Jamboard as part of our PNP lah. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
the
So I have shared the new link. If you want to try and see whether can try and edit.
so multiple people can edit at any time, right? The class, yeah?
Yes.
Mm.
And then
Yeah,
so
in this case, we allow. That means since we have no breakout room, okay, so everyone will be entering the same Jamboard, okay, the same frame. Yeah,
So
the
we
same
can
frame.
use.
So
you can use any frame that I have set up.
Okay.
So just briefly, so here you can use the pen. So the pen here is like you can draw freely. And then you can undo it if you want to undo it. Then you can erase. All right. Or you can also ask students to use sticky notes. So these sticky notes, you can write down something here, and then they can that in and adjust the size as well. So for example, if I have maybe 4 students, if I want to use the sticky notes, I will ask each student to have to use different colors. So I know yellow is maybe from Ali, green is from the other person, and etc. And then besides that, we can also add image. For example, if you might want to select any image that you already have in your laptop, or you can Google image search here and then paste it in this Jamboard. Or we also have the shapes here. We can use the shapes as well. Okay, for the shape, if you choose, let's say, square here, you can adjust the border color and the fill color of the shape. Right? And if you need them to type things, for example, if you want to type something in this box, so you just go to this T, the text box, and then go to the column and maybe type maybe number 1. Like that. And the last one is the laser, where you can use the laser to point out maybe the discussion. So you can use the laser as a laser pointer as well. So there's also set background here if you want to have colors, or maybe if you have drawings that maybe need to be drawn, so these dots maybe might be helpful that they can draw things in proportion.
Yeah, so that's it. That's about it about the Jamboard. And on top of that, you can always refer back to the work that the students have been working, because you have this Jamboard saved in your Google account. So for this activity, like what Dr. Yudaria was explaining just now, so we need to decide what kind of knowledge that you feel they will test, and the related cognitive skills assessment. So for each of the instruction here, so what we can do is maybe we'll choose number 1 and then match it to the right column, whether it's factual and understand, or is it conceptual and analyze. So we'll just put in the number.
Just put in the number, okay, that corresponds to the question inside the cell. Okay, so question 1 is going to be in cell, say cell 1 or wherever. Okay, so depends on the level, okay, of the cognitive and the type of knowledge. So you have to read from the above row and the left column. Okay, so we're going to give 15 minutes. Is that enough? 15 minutes for everyone to try out this question?
Okay, I can see a lot of people are having fun now. Okay, that's good. I think there's another software. I think remember that's invited called Miro or something like that, and something similar to this Jamboard lah.
Yeah, there's actually a lot, quite a number of. This is what we call virtual whiteboard.
Okay, so Dr. Ida, is this the last activity before we?
Yeah, this is yes, this is going to be the last activity before we're going to take a break. But we let the participants finish up the activity, and I'm going to give my response. And then after that, we're going to take a 10 minutes break.
Okay, right. So maybe during this time also, maybe the participant would like to unmute their mic and I think Kasturi Kanchan Malay tak clear. Okay. Maybe you can ask Dr. Yuda or maybe Puan Mitra on any of the topic that we have discussed up to now. Okay, feel free to have any question, intermittent question. Of course, we're going to have a Q&A towards the end, but I think right now it's almost 10:15. Maybe we can take a break, but then we can continue maybe around 10:20 perhaps. And then, so okay, everybody, if you have any question, please feel free to unmute your mic, or you can type in the chat box below. If you are too shy, you can also share your video. You want to see your face, okay, the cheerful face of the tech staff. Okay, any question, anybody?
Yeah, if this frame is too full, then you can actually move to the next frame if you like.
Oh, that's great. Okay, we have quite a number of participants here, 82 participants. So anybody? Yeah, I can see a lot of numbers here, and then Alhamdulillah, so good response from participants. So this is a very good exercise juga lah. Sometimes I think when we have been in the practicing making exams, sometimes we tend to forget about we sometimes we make questions based on what our lecturer gave us, right? And then from previous lecture we receive exam questions from previous lectures, and then we just follow them, whatever. Then so we inherit a certain way of creating exams. So I think it's a good revision way. And then I think it's okay if I share some of the just now I posted a very quick survey form. Just highlight a few points that some of the participants have. For example, some participants request if we can have some more examples. Most of the feedback are good input, very informative and eye-opening. Some of the requests are quite a third session. For example, TOS versus question versus assessment. We'll think about that. If we have time, we will try to entertain that. And then there's also someone who wrote quite an extensive comment, say 5 comments. The session needs to be more friendly. It should be not be some research perspective like previous session. I need to simplify the content presented, and seems that some of the points are too much difficult to swallow, and it's too much focus after some time. Yeah, I understand. It's a lot of maybe jargon that maybe
Yes.
it's only maybe to those who do research in this education understand that kind of things lah. So maybe in the future, perhaps if you call to Yuda or the program, maybe some terms can be changed into a more not a layman term, but more lecture friendly terms like commonly used. Perhaps also they avoid using big statements, but maybe okay, level 4. Okay, make theories easier for users to implement using simple examples. Okay, that's good. Please remind our lecturer that the speakers merely provide guidelines. So okay, this suggests the speaker you to remind the lecturers that these are merely provide guidelines. However, it should not be necessary to adopt what been taught if already met the minimum requirement of the Bloom's taxonomy lah. Because I think you are now referring to a new and revised Bloom taxonomy, right? You have this four.
Actually, this is this is what is being requested by the MQA. We need to use the RBT, the revised Bloom taxonomy, as well as the solo taxonomy.
I see. Okay. All right. Okay.
So that's why in fact at UTM, most of the faculty of engineering, they are actually using the RBT because that's according to the accreditation. They need to use the revised Bloom taxonomy and the solo taxonomy.
I see. Okay.
But I think to me the RBT is much more informative as compared to the original or the old Bloom, because the old Bloom is only giving us the level of cognitive process, but for the new version you have the knowledge, okay, which I think is actually more informative in the sense that when we create questions, okay, so we are actually looking at the different types of knowledge that we can ask, whether we are going to ask just the factual, the conceptual, so first time user may find it quite complicated in the sense that because they are not used to the terms perhaps, okay, but once you are familiar with the terms, or when you try to relate it to your own discipline, you yourself can also distinguish between the different types of knowledge actually when you say factual, conceptual, procedural, and the metacognitive. Okay, maybe it takes time for us to familiarize ourselves, but as you go on, okay, because there's always somewhere to start, right? when you start using it, then when you start using it, then and you are familiar with the terms, then it becomes easy, and you find that it is actually useful, right? So I think we're going to give 1 minute for the participant to complete the task, and I'm going to give my feedback. So you have quite I think several sets of answers that we have, okay, depending on the frame. So if we look at this frame, so we have question 1 is level 2. Okay. Question 2 is level 2 but procedural. Then you have question 6, also procedural. Question 3 is conceptual, and so on. So some of it is correct and some are actually incorrect, but it's okay. Okay, so can we stop?
Okay, right. All right. So to all participants, one, maybe if you want to ask maybe a few questions, if you want to open your mic and maybe discuss about this new RBT, whereas maybe our professors or maybe here within education would like to ask about this RBT, the new revised Bloom taxonomy. I'm sure you have implemented yet in our UTEM's curriculum and our UTEM practice. I'm not so sure about that, but I think pretty much if you make assessment, they are referred to the original Bloom taxonomy lah. But maybe someone, if you have any, or if not, maybe you can read us the questions or discussion later on. So now we are going to have 10 minutes searching and
give me about 2 minutes to show the answer. Mitra, can you stop sharing? Okay, just to satisfy, because sometimes people would like to know what is actually the correct answer. Okay, so if you look at the question, so question 1, identify. So this is basically a recall type of questions. Okay, so this is a factual. So this is going to be in cell 1. Okay, and differentiate types of water sources, and so this is actually going to be understanding. Okay, understanding and is conceptual, right? So give examples of places. So this is going to be conceptual as well, but it's going to be in level 3. Okay. So for explain, this is going to be conceptual, but level 4. Okay, explain the causes. Okay, so this is going to be again examine. This is level 5, okay, but also conceptual. Okay, this one is going to be procedural. Okay, the key mechanism or operations. Okay, so that is actually procedural type of knowledge, but this is going to be level 3. Okay, just explain. Okay, no, sorry. And this is going to be level 4. Level 4, but it is procedural. Make a PowerPoint. So this is going to be level 6. Okay, because when you create something, okay, so in fact, this is going to be also involving psychomotor skills. Okay, so this is going to be procedural. Okay, procedural, and it's level 6. And critique the PowerPoint. So this is actually referring to your self-knowledge. Okay, critique, so it's metacognitive, and it's going to be level 3. So let's look at, evaluate. Okay, so that's actually the coverage. Okay, so you have all the, and in terms of the balance, okay, so it is actually balanced in terms of coverage and complexity. So you cover, okay, almost all the cells. So then you can actually think about when you want to pose the questions. Is it going to be in the quiz? Is it going to be in the test? Or is it going to be an assignment? Like for example, questions 7 and 8, this is not possible to post it in the final exam. So it may be good to give it as an assignment. Okay, because if you look at the question, it's actually creating the PowerPoint and then asking them to critique. So this is more on the focus is more on the content of the PowerPoint rather than on the presentation. Okay, so perhaps you may want to consider such questions. So not necessarily. So that's why this taxonomy table is good as a blueprint, because it gives you, at a glance, you know the coverage and the complexity, and also it would help you to decide when to give the questions or in what form. Is it going to be in the test or in the quiz or in the exam, or as an assignment? Okay, so hope that helps. Okay, so and you can try this, because in fact I've already given this assignment before in the first session. So hopefully you can look at your own exam question, maybe take the past year exam question and try to map it on the taxonomy table and see whether, in terms of the balance, whether the coverage and the complexity is actually covering the levels of taxonomy that we want. Okay, so on that note, we're going to take a break. So over to you, Dr. Khairul. So I'm going to stop sharing.
Okay, Alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khair. Terima kasih. Thank you very much, Dr. Idaria, for a very first part of the session. I think pretty much I received a very good and very nice feedback from the participant, and also there's some recommendation for a third session also, right? Inshallah, you can have later on. Okay, so right now we are going to have a 10 minutes break. Okay, you can go and go to the toilet and take a stretching. And before that, maybe all of you would like to switch on your camera. We would like to see your faces around. And I think that Isham will play a very short video, less than 5 minutes on stretching. So it's very important, guys. We have to sitting here for 1.5 hours, and I think you're going to sit another 1.5 hours. So it's very important for us to keep our body in a very good condition lah. So if you feel tired and very sleepy, so okay. So maybe Sham could play, and maybe all of us could be together, do this exercise, and inshallah it'll be good for you, inshallah. Okay.
We often get asked which exercise is best to do at your desk. So I'm going to run you through a simple routine to do throughout your working day.
Okay. Thank you very much, Sham, for that very short video. I hope all of you take your time to do that stretching, and I think all of you should be feel a little bit good. Okay. Should we give another 5 minutes if you wish to go to the toilet? Can I see some response there at the chat, or you would like to continue? Now it's 10:30. Okay, I think we give another 5 minutes to all participants if you wish to go to the toilet break and stuff. Okay, we'll be right back in about 10:35. Okay, baik. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum semua. Welcome back. It's now 10:35 AM and I hope all of you are still fresh, masih segar, dan saya pun nampak Dr. Ida pun masih segar lagi, bersemangat lagi untuk menyampaikan pengetahuan ilmu, insyaAllah. So I hope that all of you have can get something during this first half of our presentation. Now, without further ado, I would like to give back again to Daria to continue her second part of this training session until the end before 12 o'clock. So, over to you, Dr. Yoda.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Khairul. So this is going to be the second session, which is going to be on the rubrics. Okay, so actually the considered important part. Okay, so writing the test items is only half of the story. Okay, it's only part of the story. So the other part is actually the rubrics or the marking scheme. Okay, okay, so hopefully you can evaluate the test items and examination questions at the end of the session, and also analyze and plan the implementation of scoring. Okay. So just to remind us, so rubrics are actually designed to function as scoring guidelines, but they also serve as arbiters of quality, okay, and agents of control over what is taught and valued. So it's just not simply as a scoring guidelines, but at the same time, it also as help us to judge, okay, on the quality and also control on the quality of the test items. Okay, so let's look at the marking scheme, okay? Because some of us are still using marking schemes. Yeah, it's not saying that it is incorrect or we must go to rubrics, because marking scheme is also considered, okay, as a valid guidance to help us in us making or giving a score to the task. Okay, it's just that it is good if you can specify or highlight the criteria, okay, because the criteria is actually there in the marking scheme. It's just that sometimes we don't make it explicit, okay, because when you use marking scheme, then for every questions, okay, you may need to give the solution, okay, and from there sometimes it can also create some subjectivity, especially if students solutions or students' responses are incorrect. If it's correct, there's not much problem to that. But when it is correct, then you have to make some kind of judgment on how much marks to deduct or how much marks to give. So there should be some kind of criteria, okay, and we should actually make it explicit to the students. So we're going to see some examples later. Okay, so but using assessment criteria is the way to go actually, okay, because it helps us to describe, okay, or make us describe the knowledge and skills that we expect students to demonstrate. It also set the standards, okay, so we know we can actually distinguish between a poor response and a good or an excellent response, okay, and also provide a basis for interpreting and differentiating student performance. So, and it also more generic, okay, you can use it as a framework to judge the students work across the whole course, okay, rather than creating for every task you need to create the marking scheme. So we're going to look at that later. Okay, so writing exam question is only half the story. Producing the associated marking guidance must also be considered. Okay, so the marking guidance can take a number of different forms, okay, ranging from a specimen or model answers through to descriptive criteria and detailed marking schemes matched to necessary answer content.
Sorry, Dr. Ida, can I interrupt? Can you please show your highlighted point, exit point, so we can follow which points that you are referring to. Thank you very much.
Yes, sorry about that. Okay, so I'm referring to this one here. Okay, so writing the exam question is only part, okay, of the story. So we need to produce the marking guidance, okay, and the marking guidance can take different forms, okay, so it can be from model answers to descriptive criteria in the form of rubric. So this is an example of question, courtesy of Tuan Haji Yahya. So he's also one of the trainer in OBE actually at UTM. Right. So this question came from his course. So he posed this question in the final exam. It carries 15 marks, and this is his marking scheme. Okay. So hopefully everyone can relate to the question. Okay. So basically, what the question is asking is to determine whether the ship is survived and not under this damaged condition, and this is his marking scheme. And the solution is given like this. All right. So now I'm going to pose this question to you to challenge you. Okay. Look at the 5 marks given here. Okay. And also how the distribution of the marks. Okay. If you look at the marking scheme, so there's 1 mark, that's okay. But for the 5 marks, okay, what do you think? Okay. Or how is the marks given? Okay. How is the mark distributed? If you are given this marking scheme, okay, for you to mark students' response. Okay, so we're going to put this question on the Mentimeter for you to respond. Okay, so the question is, how are the marks distributed? Okay, when you give a tick, okay, or when you give a tick or you give, say, a mark, so what is the mark associated with? What is the mark given to? Okay, what is the students doing that enable the student to get this mark? Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing and go to Mentimeter, okay, to post the question on how are the marks distributed. You're just looking at the marking scheme. Sumitra, can you? Okay, so this is going to be on Mentimeter, okay? So just go to menti.com. The code is 51329827. So that's the code. Okay, so key in 51329827. So scrutinize the given marking scheme and identify how the marks are distributed. What do students need to demonstrate in order to get marks? So this is an open response, so you can just type in your response. If you have a similar marking scheme, okay, so you can also think about your own marking scheme. So if you have some calculation, some table of values given, so what do students need to demonstrate in order to get the marks?
So I have a question, Dr. Yuda, if you mind. Yeah. So the total marks they're given is 15 marks, right?
Yeah,
and I think marks. If you add 5, 1, 2, and 1, I think, is it 1 mark for just some marks missing there? Or something
yeah, some marks missing. So mungkin Tuan Haji, tapi dikatakan 15 marks Total is 15 marks.
Okay. So this is just the entire scheme, or there's some other scheme yang missing daripada gambar tu? Because so there's 1 mark for that.
Yeah, another 5 more marks kan? 5 more marks missing.
Yeah, I think the 5 more marks.
Yeah. So I think this is just part of the marking scheme. Okay. But then but I think the part missing is also having similar type of working.
Oh, so we just need to answer whether what you think about the
what do students need to demonstrate? Yes, how the marks are distributed. I mean, what do students need to do to get, say, these 5 marks? Okay, just maybe focus on these 5 marks because this is a lot of marks to give. Okay, so say just scrutinize this part. Okay. So what do you think? Okay, or what do students need to do in order for them to get these 5 marks?
Okay, if any other participant would like to ask for clarification, feel free to unmute your mic.
Or else you can just submit what you think of, in terms of students' effort. What do students need to do? Okay, only 7 participants so far, so perhaps we may want to give another 1 minute before we set the timer. Okay, only 8 participants so far.
Maybe perhaps some of the participants I have some little bit question about this. We're not quite sure what to answer. But yeah, maybe you can get us after this. Maybe you comment on whether the marks distribution are okay or not, or perhaps maybe is it reasonable according to your rule of thumbs, perhaps something.
Yeah, maybe you can just relate to your own experience. You know, when you create a marking scheme, what is it that you're giving marks to? When you put 15 marks or 10 marks, okay, how are the marks going to be distributed? Okay, what do you expect students to do or expect students to write or to show to you in order for them to get the marks?
So maybe one of the question is that for example, the marking scheme there, step 1, parallel syncage, for example, they are just value the final answer, right? But the formula used as well as the calculation are not shown here. I think it's done on using Excel or something like that. So assume that the students manually have to write down the formula and then put in the numbers and then write the final answer. Is it?
Well, if that's a calculation.
Calculation, yes, nampak macam calculation tadi. Macam VC, AW, all that. Those are just the final answer, right? So maybe one is refer to which answer is that. There's VC, AW, and I think there's quite a lot for 1 point, right? I'm not sure.
Or maybe the students are just using the calculator and marks are only given to the results. So
perhaps.
Perhaps. So that's actually the expectation that we need to make explicit to the students actually. Okay. So when you have a marking scheme like this, okay, and if the student get it right, then there's no problem. The problem arises when there are mistakes. Okay? The student make mistakes. Now, are you going to penalize the students or are you going to give them straight away 0? Okay? Or you need to look carefully at what the students are doing, and maybe there are some partial credits, okay, that is worth giving, partial marks. Okay. So I think we're going to set a timer. Can we set a timer, Mitra, to 1 minute? So
okay, for the rest of the participants, if you want to ask verification or you have anything to share, maybe from your experiences during all these finance. I think today is week 5 or 6 is around the time where I think a lot of lecturers are now making final exams, vetting, moderation, and all those things. So it's a good time maybe to reflect what are the practices and maybe you can guide, give some answers on. And so to all participants, do you have any question to ask regarding marking schemes, assessment, maybe to share your practice?
Yeah. Because when we say that we are giving a guide, as exam guide or the test guide, that's actually the thing that we need to put on the guide, your expectation. Okay. What do students need to do in order for them to get the marks? Okay. So we are not actually putting the question. We're actually giving them the, making explicit our marking criteria actually. Okay, so only 14 participants managed to give their response. So perhaps we want to see the response given by the 14 participants. Okay, so this is an open-ended. Okay, so we're going to look at the. Okay, so it says that calculation need to do a lot of calculation. Okay, not well distributed. Okay. So this is actually commenting on the marking scheme rather than giving suggestion on how the marks are distributed. So Vince, can you push a little bit higher? So 5 marks to the answer, needs to improve the marking. So they're just actually commenting on the marking scheme rather than on suggestions how the marks are distributed. Okay. So perhaps okay, this is actually one important thing that I think every lecturer need to think about. Okay, when you prepare a marking scheme, okay, so you need to think about how the marks are distributed. Okay. Given to steps, given to calculation, okay, calculation step, valid point, okay, there's some suggestions there. To the answer, okay, given another team, where and how to distribute, okay, the formula, okay, there's some suggestions there. Right, so thank you for the response. So now let's look at, we go back to the slides and see my suggestion. Okay, so this is what is given by the lecturer, and also we're going to look also at the lecturer's suggestion later. Okay, so this is my suggestion. Okay. So the marks actually can be given, okay, but you can add more if you like, okay, depending on your own discipline. Okay, so so we have 3 here. So marks can be given to the method, okay, to the accuracy, and to the results. Okay. So then you can make some notes. Okay, when you say method, what is it? What you mean by the method? Okay, so valid method, and then not lost for numerical error, algebraic slips or error in units, and then correct application of formula. Okay, will not earn. Okay, if you the student just write the formula without doing anything to the formula, okay, will not earn then the M marks, but can be given for a correct answer. Okay, so the M mark can also be implied for a correct answer. And then accuracy is awarded. Okay, so how do you get the accuracy marks? Okay, when the intermediate steps correctly obtained, and then it cannot be given if the method mark is earned. It's not earned or implied. That means they will not get the accuracy marks if the method is not given, okay, or implied. Okay. So results marks for correct result statement independent of method marks. Okay, so this is actually results. Sometimes these marks can be earned, okay, if the method is incorrect. Okay, but what follows from the method, that means in terms of the reasoning, in terms of the algebraic manipulation is correct. Okay, although the method is incorrect. Okay, but you can actually give some marks. Okay, partial marks for results, meaning that the students still manage to give or make correct reasoning and algebraic manipulation based on the incorrect methods, but they will lose marks on the method, of course, okay, and also on accuracy. So they'll get some marks only on the results. So that's how actually the marks can be awarded. Okay. So this is the solo taxonomy. Okay, remember that I mentioned earlier that besides the Bloom taxonomy, we use Bloom taxonomy to create the questions. Right. So when you get back the responses from the students, okay, so normally solo taxonomy is a very good framework to use to help us categorize, okay, help us analyze the quality of the students' responses. So the SOLO is actually an acronym for structure of observed learning outcomes. So that's actually the acronym for the SOLO. Okay. So it classifies the student responses or students' learning into 5 categories. Okay. So pre-structural means students may give response, but it's totally incorrect. Okay, so the student missed the point. So this is considered pre-structural. Okay, so unistructural, students manage to give a response, but it's only a single response. Okay, And multi-structural means the students able to give multiple responses, but no attempt was made to make connection between the responses. Like for example, if you give the student ask the student to explain something, so the student lists all the aspects, okay, or the components of the topic or the text or the context, but no attempt were made to make connection or show how the points are related. Okay, so this is multi-structural. Now, relational is when the students are able to give multiple responses and make connection, able to analyze, okay, and show some or able to elaborate, okay, on the interrelationship or relationship between the points or between the components. And extended abstract is the highest. This is actually considered the excellent students, where not only they manage to make the connection, but they also manage to evaluate and generalize. Okay, generalize it to a new idea. Okay, so this is actually what you call the extended abstract. So based on this, you can actually make discrimination or distinguish between the quality of the students' responses. So in fact, if you were to compare the two, Solo and Bloom, you put it side by side, there are actually some association, okay, in terms of the levels. Okay, so you can see that Bloom taxonomy, the highest level on applying onwards, and the Solo taxonomy in terms of the relational and extended abstract, actually it matches. Okay, so when we create the question, we use Bloom, but when we evaluate the students' responses, we use Solo. Right, so a bit on the terminology, the rubric. So what you mean by rubric? So it's a scoring tool used to describe the criteria in grading the performance of students. Okay, now why we want to create rubric? Because it's actually provide a much clearer guidance as to how students' work will be assessed as compared to marking scheme. Okay, because it will make explicit the criteria as well as how the marks are distributed. Okay, so how do we know learning outcomes are achieved? Okay, so we have this performance, what we call the indicators of learning outcomes. Okay, so things students would do, make, say, all right. The rubric describe the performance and also give structure to give more effective feedback to students. Okay, that's actually the advantage of having a rubric, because we can make not only as a scoring tool, but we can also make use of rubrics as a feedback, okay, as a feedback tool to students. Okay, so it provides valuable information about aspects of the course that are working well and which are not. So it also gives us an indication of the effectiveness of our teaching. Right. So the general rubrics, okay, use criteria and description of performance, okay, with different tasks. The tasks all have to be instances of the same learning outcome. So if we have a rubric, a general rubric, we can actually use this same rubric over or across the course, regardless of across the same learning outcome, okay, in the course, regardless of the assessment task. Okay, so the task can be of different types, but the rubric can be used for the same learning outcome. Okay, so the criteria point to aspects of the learning outcome and not to features of any one specific task. Okay, so that sometimes creating a general rubric is very helpful, since we can use it to multiple type of tasks. Okay, as the criteria is pointing towards the assessing the learning outcomes rather than assessing the tasks. Okay, so the description focus on students on what their learning outcome, the knowledge and skills is supposed to be. Okay, and also we also need to think whether are we assessing the product or the process, because depending on the product or process, the rubrics will be different. Right, so let's look at the development of rubrics. Okay, so marking tools. Okay, if we are considered it as a marking tool, so we should develop it hand in hand with the assessment task. Okay, so this is not something that we develop without referring to the assessment task. So it should be developed hand in hand. Okay, as it reflects attention and purpose of assessment, so it must be aligned to our course outcomes as well as the assessment outcomes. Okay, so the advantage of having rubric, because it brings clarity and transparency to our assessment, and it also ascertain whether or not students have achieved the learning outcomes. So it helps in quantifying the achievement of the outcomes. Okay, and it also helps to communicate to students and also to other assessors. Okay, just sometimes we have multi-sections, courses, okay, of the same course. Okay, and we have something at UTM to avoid or to create some consistency. We tend to change the section. Say you are teaching in section A and the person teaching in section B will switch in terms of the marking. Okay? So having the explicit criteria will help in the consistency in marking. And it can also be used as a teaching resources. That means we can make use of the rubrics or the criteria that we have spelled out to indicate any gaps or weaknesses in our performance, and also the things that we need to improve and to focus on in future as a feed forward rather than feedback. Okay, now how do we link outcomes and the performance? Okay, so remember that when we do assessment, we are actually assessing the learning outcomes. So we have to link. Okay, we have to link between the criteria and the learning outcomes, because that is what we are assessing. Okay, so the criteria should focus around the knowledge and skills to be assessed. Okay, so the verbs in the outcomes describe the student action. So the assessment should measure the action. Okay, so this is an example. Okay, so suppose you have this task was given in the previous workshop. So for those of you who have not attended part 1, okay, so you can look at the materials again. Okay, this is how you make explicit the criteria based on the outcomes that you have set. Okay, so suppose you have the outcomes with the active verb explain. Okay, now this is actually the prompts here help you to clarify what is it that you are looking for, and also your expectation, and also what students need to do to be successful. Okay, so you're looking for the description of the verb that you are looking for here is explain, because that's actually what is mentioned or stated in the learning outcomes. Now, your expectation or the descriptor of the verb is that you expect, okay, explain concept or scenario, etc. That the situation that you are given. And for students to be successful, they need to evaluate with clarity, providing reasoning and also examples. That is actually the performance attributes. Okay, so you can translate this now into this rubric. Okay, or you can call this marking scheme if you like. Okay, so the criteria there is actually the how well the explanation is carried out. Okay, so you can put the highest. Okay, because this one here, when you make explicit the performance criteria, this should be the highest. Okay, the high end of the performance. Okay, so that would be if the scale is 4. Okay, or you can also create 5 if you like. Okay, so if the scale is 4, that will be the rating 4. Okay, and from there you can slowly reduce some of the aspects in the description. Okay, to discriminate the responses. Okay, so in the end, actually, for one, only able to explain concept or scenario with clarity. Okay, so the reasoning is missing. Okay, the examples is also missing. So sometimes you can actually look at the highest first and then the lowest, and then you can fill in the in between. Okay, so in between will be some aspect will be missing, but some are there. So that's how actually you make clear the criteria for the outcomes. Okay, now coming back to the original question that we have posted earlier. So this is what Tuan Haji suggests. Okay, so given the question, okay, so when you create the marking scheme, okay, your expectation or the answering process is laid out. Okay, list out what is it that you want students to go through, okay, when answering these questions. Okay, so there are 9 steps there. Okay, you say read and understand the question, identify the problem. So the one that is in red is the what the students really need to show in order for them to gain the marks. Okay, so to identify the problem to be solved, and then information data given, okay, must be highlighted, and then the calculation procedure must be clear, okay, carried out step by step, and then the formula is there, okay, and then the algebraic manipulation, then they need to check the accuracy, and then giving the answer and the conclusion. Okay, so once this is listed out, so this can actually be converted into rubric. Okay. So this is how it is done, right? So remember just now we have the marking scheme with all the marks. Okay, so the question just now I asked you to focus on how this 5 marks is distributed. So this is actually how it is being laid out explicitly. Okay, how this is obtained is based on the answering process. Okay, so you can actually make it into this is a rating scale. Okay, all 6 steps carried out, and then you have the score. Okay, most step missing, and no calculation, you get 0. Okay, and for these 2 marks, okay, this is on judgment. Okay, so judgment made correctly, you get the full mark, and no judgment made, you get 0. Okay. So that gives you the rubric. Okay. And marking scheme with rubrics tend to give better results, okay, and provide essential information on students' true ability in terms of the strength or weaknesses that lead to appropriate CQI effort. So in fact, if you have a clear rubric, it helps you also in making improvement. Okay, and any question?
Yes. Is there any question from the participant?
Yeah.
If you have any, can you please
Yeah, if you have any question, you just unmute yourself and you can raise the question. Okay, so we're going to look at the types of rubrics. So we have commonly 4 types: the checklist, the rating scales, holistic rubrics, and also the analytic rubrics, or sometimes called also the descriptive rubrics. Okay, so this is an example of rating scale. Okay, similar to the one for the one that Tuan Haji showed just now. So it's similar. Okay, so you list the criteria and then the score. Alright, so we're going to look at the holistic and analytic rubrics because this most commonly used actually, right? So parts of the rubrics, so you have the criteria, you have the indicator, which is the description of the criteria, and the scoring scales, the one that discriminate the levels of performance. Okay, so I'm going to give you another example, okay, which will help in creating the holistic rubric. Okay. So holistic rubric means you lump everything together, all the criteria in one band. Okay. So for example, you have discuss here. Okay. So that's actually the active verb discuss. Okay. And your expectation is that students will discuss aspects of the topics, the facts, the principles, theories, etc. in group or pair discussion and in class discussion actively. So that's actually your expectation. So this actually learning outcomes is discussion in class discussion carried out in pairs, in groups, or the whole class. Okay. Now, for students to be successful, so you lay out what is it that you want students to do in order for them to demonstrate to you that the outcomes has been achieved. Okay, in terms of discussion. So you expect them to participate actively in group or in pair discussion and also in class discussion. Okay, and during the discussion, what is it that you want them to do? Okay, so you want them to voice their views actively without prompting, respond actively to viewpoints raised by their friends, and also elaborate on viewpoints. Okay, and then you can translate this into the levels of performance. Okay, so if they have all this, we consider that this is the highest or the high or the top end of the rating. Okay, and then you're going to miss some of this. Okay, in between here, and one here is you can oh, this is active now, hardly. Okay, hardly respond. Okay, does not take interest. Okay, so in 3, perhaps you may want to miss one of the points. Say they voice actively without prompting, respond actively but do not elaborate. So that would be 3. Or 2, maybe they don't respond, they don't elaborate but only voice their views actively. Okay, so you can actually reduce some of the description as you go along the level. Okay, and then you can come up with the holistic rubric. Okay, so this is the holistic rubric. Okay, so the source is from Dr. Khairi, which he used it in his class. So this is a 10% worth of assignment. Right, so now you're going to do this activity. Okay, so suppose you have the discuss, distinguish, differentiate in the learning outcomes as the active verb. Okay, but you aim to give a written test item. Okay, remember this one just now is actually also discussed, but this is discussion in class, okay, or done in group or in pairs. Now, suppose you have a similar, okay, learning outcomes with the active verb discuss, distinguish, differentiate. Okay, all these are actually of the same level. Okay, and you want to give a written test item. So, like, can you identify the performance attributes? Okay, so we're going to do this. Ini Jamboard ke Menti ya, Mitra?
It's Menti.
Menti. Okay, so we're going to go to the Menti.
Yang
Menti
ni,
kan?
doktor just one attribute ke?
Yeah, just give
The
perhaps
highest
just
performance.
yes,
Is it?
yeah, the highest
Okay.
performance. Okay, so we're going to do this on Menti. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing and Mitra will show you the Menti. Okay, so suppose now think about your own learning outcomes. I'm sure you have a learning outcomes, okay, that have discussed, distinguish, or differentiate as the active verb, and you aim to give a written test item. Okay, now can you identify the performance attributes or the success criteria for this learning outcome? Okay, so go to menti.com. Okay, so Mitra will share you the slide with the code. Okay, so the code is 51329827. So what would be the performance attributes or the success criteria? What is it that you want students to do, okay, that shows or that demonstrate to you that they have the ability to discuss? Okay, so we give you about 1 minute to think on your own first, and then we're going to set the timer for the response. Okay, can we set the timer to 1 minute? So far, nobody. Nobody responded. Okay, so we have one.
All participants can give your answer and the code I will type it down there. Just mention basically need to write down what is the performance criteria for the highest level.
Yeah, the highest level. What is it that you want students to do to show to you that they have the ability to discuss?
Discuss. Okay, I think the verb action is discuss. So
discuss, distinguish, differentiate. These are all of the same. So only 2 participants so far. So perhaps we need to increase the timing to give others. So hopefully, hopefully most of you will try these questions or try to give your response. Okay.
You can open it back. I think we need some more response. So basically, for example, like this some example I'm explaining, discuss the concept of
discuss a topic or a concept or a context or a situation. So you may have some questions like that.
what will be the criteria that we want to, basically what we want, basically you're looking for the exam, written exam lah. What we want the student to write in order to address the verb discussed, isn't it? I think Mitra, let's close the feedback.
Yeah, we close the feedback so that
I think it's open now.
yeah, it's still open.
Yeah, it's
So
still
only
open, but
five.
without the countdown.
Yeah, without the countdown, and also
Okay.
we hide the response from the five participants. Only 5 people so far have attempted to answer these questions.
Okay. Anybody can, guys, please write your response. I think they're looking for what criteria lah. You can think of an actual example, for example, from your 60 plus.
Yeah, you can use your own course as an example.
Discuss and elaborate the concept of, for example, dynamics of.
Try to think about your own marking scheme. Okay, I'm sure you, if you don't have a criteria right yet, but you have, say, a marking scheme, okay, on questions that require students to discuss. Okay, now think about the marks. How are the marks distributed?
Can the participant write 2, 3 response or only 1 response only?
I think we allow more than 1, right, Mitra?
Only one.
I
Only
think
one.
so, yeah. No. I think
Only one.
multiple.
Only one time only.
Multiple response.
Multiple response. Saya try. Oh, yeah, boleh. Can. If you guys want to send multiple response, you can just go back to Menti, fill in the code again, and we'll go back to the submission lah. Okay, so.
Yeah, I think we need to close the session because we have because of the time factor, we need to proceed. But nevertheless, thank you to the 5 participants who are brave enough to respond to these questions. Okay, so able to specify and elaborate with examples, outline the major, okay, contain important points, propose steps, okay, use, okay, apply the concept, relate, and then use. Okay, so we only have 6 people responding and understanding, right? Okay, so Mitra can stop sharing. So I'm going to give you the example, okay, of the possible. Okay, so not necessarily you're going to use exactly the same answer, but this is a possible answer or possible attributes that you can use, okay, to indicate discuss. Okay, so discuss the topic, context, situation, considering all aspects and factors impacting on its implementation. So that's actually the criteria. So number 4 is able to summarize aspects, comparing, contrasting, and defending your position on the impacts. So that's actually the highest. Okay, and then the lowest is just able to list or explain without comparing, contrasting, or defending. Okay, just able to describe the impacts. Okay, now this is in the form of what we call the holistic rubrics. Okay, so you may want to be more specific on the criteria. Maybe you want to add this criteria, and you can create now another type of rubric, what we call the analytical rubric. So, for example, the knowledge of subject matter, the critical and creative thinking, the communication of information and idea, quality of argument, writing, spelling, and grammar. So, these are some possible criteria that you may want to include in the rubric. Okay. So, in creating analytic rubric, okay, so this is just a simple quantitative approach to assigning points or marks to each criteria. So, for example, on a 4-point scale, so 4 indicates the task or elements are done. So for 3, only partially correct. Okay. So for 2, clearly incorrect. And 1 may be task or element not done. Okay. So in actually, when you want to create rubric, it's better to identify the endpoints or the extreme end first. Okay, the highest and the lowest, and then in between you can slowly decrease or let go some of the criteria. Okay, so this is an example of analytic rubric for, I think, peer assessment. Okay, so that's where there is actually the list of things that you want students to demonstrate. Okay, so they must attend the group regularly, contribution in terms of participation, and then complete tasks on time, the quality of completed work, and also contribute significantly to the success of the project. Okay, so and then you can actually create the 4. Okay, the rating for 4 first, because that's actually the highest performance that you expect. Okay. And then slowly you reduce. For example, like attend 100% of the group meeting, and then 3 attended 60%, and 2 attended 30%, and maybe for the last is fails to attend the group meeting. Okay. So that's how the discrimination of the level is made. So you do the same for the other criteria. Okay. So evaluating your rubric. So when you create a rubric, you also need to look at it again, and revise it, and make sure that the rubrics that you created are related to the outcomes being measured. Okay, so the criteria must address the outcomes to be measured. And then does it cover important criteria for student performance? Okay, it must be authentic, it reflects what's emphasized for the learning outcomes and assignments, because sometimes it's easy for us to just adopt other people's rubric without actually looking at the suitability or the appropriateness. Okay, because it's actually created by somebody else, but you think that it is also relevant to your course, but you really need to check on the suitability in terms of the outcomes and also in terms of the student performance. And the top end of the rubric must reflect excellence. Okay, so this is actually the one that we need to create first, the excellence, because we want the expectation is that when the outcomes is achieved, if you remember Miller's pyramid, that means we have already managed to bring the students to the expert level, which is actually excellence, an outstanding student. So we have to be clear on the high end. What is it that students need to do, to tell us that the outcome has been achieved? So it must truly represent the excellent ability. And then the criteria and skills must be well defined. When you want to create this analytical rubric, that means you should be able to distinguish the level of students' performance. So you may want to use or refer solo taxonomy to help you in the levels. And then it should be applicable consistently by different scorers. Meaning, if other people use your rubric, for example, in the case of multi-section courses where you have the same course but many sections, so perhaps you want other lecturers may also want to use the same rubric, because the course is the same, it's just different section. So this inter-rater reliability or the inter-rater agreement, the shared understanding must be there, in order for it to be consistently applied. Right. So this is a template.
There's one question from one of the participants. Mama Hatta asked, is there any possibility for 0 point in rubric? Let's say, for example, from your previous slide, let's say from scale 0 to 4, for those who, for example, did not participate or submit the task. I mean, you should be able from 1 to 4, right? But does it mean that the mark is 0 to 1 to 4 only, or you can put 0 there?
You can. Yeah. There's just an example, because as you can see, 1, if you look back at the example just now, 1 is not totally a fail. For example, this one here. See, 1. See, the students are able to identify aspects. So there are partial credit there. So you want to put 0, that means there's nothing, the discussion is totally off point. Okay, so there is no say could not summarize, could not compare, or could not defend, could not describe. Okay, so you can put it as 0. Okay, so it is possible. And also this point here, the rating 4, 3, 2, 1, you can actually multiply it by a factor. For example, if the question is carrying 10 marks, okay, so you may want to multiply it by a factor to convert 4 to 10. Okay, so not necessarily 4 means 4 points or 4 marks. Okay, so it depends on the weight of the question. Okay, so we come to assessing test items quality. So there are several methods for collecting feedback on the quality of your test items. Okay, so you may want to use a self-review checklist. You may also involve the students in the evaluation of the test item. Okay, and vetting by a panel or committee. I think this is most commonly done, and I'm sure you can also do the same, right? Okay, you do have a panel that will vet on the questions before, especially for final exam questions. There is a vetting committee to look at the format, the cognitive demand, the content validity, and so on. Okay, so we're going to look at some examples. So this is a checklist for evaluating test items. For example, you want to give an essay. Okay, so you can create a checklist, okay, to see whether it meets, okay, the requirement. So, for example, the items elicit the type of behavior I wanted to measure. Okay, so it's clearly indicated. Task is clearly indicated. Okay, the point, value, or weight, and estimated time limit for answering is indicated. Okay, so all the important things, okay, associated with creating the essay questions. Right, so you can have a checklist. So this is actually adopted from Illinois University. So you can actually go to the website for more examples. Okay. So this is an example of a questionnaire, okay, given to students. Okay. So you can give the past year exam paper for them to evaluate. Okay. Of course, you don't give the current question paper. You give the past year exam question paper for them to evaluate in terms of the suitability. Okay. So you can actually create a questionnaire and get some responses from them. Okay. Just a simple one. For example, like this, whether it's an excellent or poor. How would you rate the examination question? Okay. And how well did the examination question reflect content and emphasis of the course, and so on. So this will give you an indication whether the question that you had created is worth to the students, okay, in terms of answering the question and also of the time that they spend for the course. Okay, and an example of a vetting checklist. And of course, a vetting checklist normally will have more to it, but this is just highlighting the part where it includes the rubric. So this is a checklist type of rubric. Okay, so you have a vetter, say, okay, 2 other colleagues which will do the assessing beside you, and you can actually list, okay, the things that should identify or should inform you of the quality of the test item that you had created. Okay, so this is an activity that you're going to do on Jamboard. Okay, so again, the question comes from Tuan Haji. Okay, because I selected this question, I think, because it's quite simple to understand. Okay, for people who are not even in marine engineering, okay, it's quite easy to relate to the question. Right. So consider the test item. So the question here is, what do students actually have to do to get rewarded? What was most valued in the item, or was least valued? And what were the assumed knowledge and skills required for the task? Because this actually will help us in the creating the marking scheme as well as the rubric. Okay, so this is going to be on the Jamboard. Okay, so if you like, you can copy the question in your computer, and you can do it on your computer, and later we can get some responses from you. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing and pass this to Mitra to show the Jamboard. So we have plenty of time, okay, because this is usually the last activity. So So I think I'm going to give 20 minutes. Is that okay? 20 minutes. Okay, there's actually one more activity, but I think the other activity you can do that on your own. So we're going to focus on this activity. So 20 minutes, is that okay? So we have 10 minutes for discussion, for the response.
Sure. 15 to 30 minutes about us. So 11:30.
Yeah.
So we are going to stop around 11:45 and 50. Then we're going to have question and answers now. So right now it's a free flow activity. All participants can go into the link Jamboard.
Okay. So this is actually testing what you know about what you have listened so far throughout the 2-hour session, even from the part 1 of the workshop. Okay. So this help you, okay, to test your own knowledge. So whether you can put the knowledge that you know into functioning knowledge.
Okay. This is a test exam.
Yeah. In a way.
So anyway, during this period also, I think all participants can unmute your mic if you have any question and answer.
Feel free to ask anything.
Maybe participant would like to ask, would like to share maybe some of your example of workplace or example of marketing schemes. Maybe you can want to have some advice, or perhaps maybe you want to share your experiences on how to effectively create this market assessment.
So the Jamboard link is in chat. It's already pasted in chat. So everyone can just click, I think, the link, and you're going to go to the Jamboard. So if the frame 1 is full, you can go to the following frame. So you just click on the arrow there at the top, okay, for you to move in between the frames.
Please ignore the CP down there. It's typo.
Okay, so there's a typo. CP shouldn't be there. Just indicate copy and paste.
What students actually have to do to get involved? We can reduce the font size, right, for the text. Font size. Text box.
Yes, we can. So you can choose display, subtitle, or title.
No, actually, if you go to the left, there's actually where you can zoom. Okay, you can zoom at there's actually a hidden ruler on the left-hand side of the screen. So you can zoom on it to make it clearer, to make it bigger.
The zoom, I think, is at the top here. But I'm not sure if you're talking about ruler too.
Ni ada. If you click, bring your cursor to the leftmost of the screen, it will also appear. This one here. Okay, everyone. So hopefully you can try your newly gained knowledge. So looking at this type of question, so the question is actually asking the students to propose. Okay, put forward your suggestions and support it with appropriate technical arguments based on the knowledge that you have learned in the course. And it's worth 15 marks.
This is an example of
Actually, this is an actual exam question.
An exam question.
Yeah, an actual exam question, but it's a past year exam question. I think it was given in 2013 or several years ago.
In the first question, what do students actually have to do? What is this marks kind of points?
This is really referring to
the marks lah.
Yeah, to get the marks, yes.
Okay.
Okay. Now, the response that we have got so far is actually referring to the actual solution, but we're actually not asking the solutions. We're actually asking what the students actually have to do in terms of the knowledge, or in terms of the remember the marking scheme just now, okay, that we gave, to methods, to accuracy, results. Okay, so more on to the criteria actually. But it's okay. We can. So perhaps the one who's posting this understood the question very well.
This is more like an open-ended question. So the key word here is something like to discuss or something like that, or to suggest, or put forward your suggestion. That's the main keyword, right?
Yes, there's the main keywords. Okay. So you can also try to identify the level of this question. What level do you think it will fall in terms of the Bloom taxonomy?
Evaluation, value the problems. The data. When the question asks what was most value in the item, what is the most part of the question that gives the highest marks, isn't it?
Okay.
Okay.
So that's actually referring. Yeah, that's actually referring to the students' effort. What is it that students need to do to show, okay, that will get them the highest marks or the most marks?
And so technical must be supportive calculations and facts and figures, right? I guess.
Yes. Yeah, maybe because sometimes like if the students actually focusing more on the formatting in this case will actually it's not important. Okay. So, but maybe there are some students who actually focus on the formatting, okay, in terms of the number of paragraphs or things like that. Okay. So that's what we meant by the least valued in the item.
Mm.
Procedure. Procedure.
So, the last question there, what were the assumed knowledge and skills required? There's a CP there. What does this CP stand for?
There's a typo error.
Okay. Sorry. Okay.
It's typo error, yeah.
Assumed knowledge and skills required. Assumed knowledge and skills required for the task. May I know whether is from mechanical engineering, right? Or marine engineering?
Yes, this is a naval. The course, I think the name of the course is naval engineering. Something.
Naval engineering. Wow. Students, this is a final year 1 or year 4 student?
I think it's the higher level. I think it must be third year or fourth year course.
Third or fourth year. So this the question again. The question is quite wow. Put forward your suggestion and support it.
Level 5 and 6.
This is a very high level question. So overall, what in final exam UTM for practice, you have how many questions? How many marks per question? Is it 15 or 25? Because I think in practice in UTM is about 25 marks.
I think the final exam should be no more than 50%. No more than 50%. That means you can have 40% final, 60% coursework. Or you can have 50% final, 50% coursework.
Okay.
So maybe we can give another 5 more minutes for participants to finish off. So somebody have put there level 5 and level 6. So describe the suggestion to solve the problem, suggest action, list the suggestion, restate the problem. So that's the least valued. Okay. Most valued is suggest action. Go to propose a cover up. So justify the problem. C5.
Tapi pada siren dalam Melaka tak ada masalah. Aku nak kena tahan dia. Okay. Ada siapa nak tanya soalan ke?
So describe suggestion and support with appropriate technical arguments. Okay. To analyze the situation. Hunter. Make the sub horizontal. At the damage. Okay.
Dr. Yuda, the assumed knowledge and skills to meaning that is it the actual the knowledge in subject matter ke ataupun macam mana tu?
In terms of tu lah, sama ada yang dia factual ke, procedural, knowledge in subject matter lah.
Oh, okay. The type of knowledge lah basically lah. Okay.
Knowledge
Procedural.
and also the the skills. Yeah, skills refers to like writing skills, communication skills, also all the attributes. So maybe we give 1 more minute, and then perhaps we can actually open to anyone who would like to present their response.
So basically, this overall exercise is basically on the planning stage lah. On if we want to create a test item. So these are the questions that we should take into mind. What are actual to be rewarded? What is the most valued item? What's this value? So these are the things that we should use as a guide.
Think about yes.
Okay. I understand.
In fact, this actually question prompts you to think about the marking scheme sebenarnya. The marking scheme in terms of the criteria. Okay, not the solution, because this is an open-ended question. So open-ended question, okay, you can have many. So as a assessor, you don't expect to create many marking scheme, right? So you need to come up with a criteria. Okay? Maybe not in the form of a rubric, but you make explicit the criteria in terms of writing, in terms of maybe just spell out the things that you expect student to show, in the manuscript. Okay, when they handed in the manuscript. Okay, so for example, you have another assessor who is going to mark. So the assessor is informed of what is it that marks will be given to.
Nice. Okay.
This is a case where having a marking scheme is not appropriate or is not possible. So you need to come up with the criteria. You need to have the criteria.
Okay, so the example criteria that you have given before, like in the slides from Cik Yahya kan, yang ada. Okay. So the criteria will guide us because there's no one straight answer. So there should be a criteria that govern the answer lah, basically. Control the answers that you want to give them marks.
When you receive the student's manuscript, manuscript, what is it that you are looking at for the students to get marks? Okay, so this is 15 marks. So that's a lot, 15 marks. So how is the 15 marks going to be distributed? Okay, for the throughout the students' answer sheet.
Okay, so I think it's already. Okay. So I think it's already 11:50. So maybe Dr. Yuda wants to continue with your explain the exercise a little bit.
So perhaps we will invite anybody, one or two of you, to share what you had responded here. Okay. Anybody would like to present? Okay. Just unmute yourself and share.
Okay. So open, everybody. Everybody here is brave enough to maybe not brave lah. I mean, all adult learners kan, so it should be okay lah. Nothing to shy about, right? So anybody wants to open up and because we're almost towards the end of the session, it's almost 12 o'clock. So I think it's about time, and maybe we can, if you want to switch on your videos, or we can have a free flow of conversation, and so we can treat it as a Q&A session lah. So
Yes.
yeah, everybody,
But
you want to?
yeah, but we invite anyone first to share what you had written here. Okay. To share with us your responses to this type of question. Okay, this is an open-ended question. So how would you actually come up with the marking scheme or the rubric, okay, for this type of questions? Anybody?
Okay, anybody?
Yeah, perhaps we invite one person.
Okay, perhaps may I invite maybe PM Dr. Abdul Rahim from FK, my friend there.
So this is cold calling.
Calling saja je kawan. Okay, maybe Engineer Mazlan Mansur, maybe perhaps Dr. Zaliha or maybe Dr. Nizamuddin would like to have a few words. I think pretty much all of these people around here are all PhD holders, and you have a lot of experience in making text items for years. And maybe you want to maybe not answer the question, maybe you want to share your experiences or opinions. Want to add to Dr. Yuda, perhaps your points, maybe anybody? I know it's Ramadan and everybody is tired and hungry, so
nobody is brave enough to to share their responses.
Tak apa. Okay, ada sesiapa tak? Tak ada?
Nobody?
Okay, kalau tak ada, maybe we have about 5 more minutes before we end our session. Perhaps maybe Dr. Ida want to have
I'm going
summarize this
share,
example.
Yes, I'm going to share what the lecturer himself gave in terms of the criteria. Okay, so maybe Mitra can stop sharing so that I can show the slide. Okay, so some of you had written just now. Okay, there are some correct response given to the Jamboard. Okay, unfortunately, nobody is willing to speak out. Okay, so it's okay. But let's look at what Tuan Haji had given. So this is the it says assessing student ability to apply knowledge. Okay, so actually the name of the course, I think naval something. Okay, and critically proposed solution. Okay, so marks will be given based on how relevant the solution to the knowledge they have learned and the reason behind it. So that's actually, you can pick up the criteria. Okay, so ability to apply knowledge and then critically propose solution, and then the relevancy of the solution as well as the reasoning. Okay, and I had translated this into the rating scale. Okay, so the descriptor of the verb is actually to put forward a possible solution or theory to be proven. Okay, so the highest performance there is able to list and explain components of the solution or theory and justify the reasoning, how they could be addressed in evaluating the processes. Okay, and you can the other end, okay, the one that will lose a lot of mark is just list the component and summarize. So there's no reasoning, there's no justification or even elaboration on how to evaluate. Okay, so that's actually how we can translate. So I hope, although just now for some of you maybe the task may be quite difficult because it is actually at the highest level. Okay, it is level 6 and contributing to PO3 and PO4. So there's some technical. PO3 I think is the ability to use to solve real problem, and PO4 is generic communication. Right. So there's actually one more question. I think you can do this on your own. Okay, this is referring to your own exam question and prepare the rubric. So hopefully, okay, although you cannot prepare the rubric in terms of the analytic or the holistic, at least you can identify the criteria. Okay, right. So now what rubrics can do and cannot do, it does not make the assessment decision. It is a responsibility of you as the assessor. It only provides guiding frame. Okay, for focusing attention on the construct or the performance criteria and the give a summary of the range of performance. Okay, so that's why it is important for you to make explicit the criteria, because that's actually the one that we share with the students. Okay. Right. So on that note, I end the session and pass it to Dr. Khairul. So this is just a reflection, one takeaway, one surprise, and one area to explore further. Okay, for you to think about. Okay. So thank you.
Okay. Okay.
Dr.
Ada
Rifat,
soalan?
the reflection is at the there's a link for the reflection in the Google form. If you can fill that in.
Okay. So it's actually provided in the Google form.
Okay, and then on top of that, I also share a quick
So I'm going to start
form.
sharing.
Okay, there's a form there for a quick review of this training. Apart from the TIA form that you are going to fill in in order to obtain your CPDs lah. All right, so before we end our session, we open a few more minutes. I think we have about 4 to 5 minutes before 12 o'clock. And anybody who would like to ask any question, so Alhamdulillah, we are on the dot, on the spot, and we have nicely. Yeah. And can you please unmute your mic tadi? Siapa tanya tadi? Soalan tadi? Yes. Okay. All right. If you want, you can type tips, right? Require share video. Yes, of course. We are going to share the video. In fact, right now we are streaming live in Facebook as well as YouTube. And we are also going to share the video, the link in the KAIS website right away lah, inshallah. As well as the note material already been given to you by email. I think, but for those who have not received my email, you can check on KAIS website for the materials. All right. Jawapan saya tadi. Okay. Encik Syed tanya ke, maybe you can unmute your mic. Encik Syed boleh. Kau ada masalah mic eh. Encik Syed, soalan apa tadi? Boleh ulang sekali tak? Boleh, can you rephrase again your question?
You can type your question in chat actually, if you don't want to speak out.
Okay, yang lain macam mana? Dr. Intan, Dr. Fairul Azma, anybody? Dr. Mas Sanusi, all the Ds here, the doctors here. We have 83 participants here. So any question that you would like to ask Dr. Yudaria? She has been very actively. In fact, she has just given training yesterday with some Indonesian dekat live. On assessment juga ke?
On assessment, yes. In fact, we also have this morning, but since it clashed with UTM, so I have to let go of that.
Thank you very much.
We have another group actually this morning.
I see. Subhanallah. Terima kasih banyak-banyak lah. Thank you very much for giving us the priority. Okay. So any last call for any question before kita end our session? And before that, I'd like to remind, mungkin kita boleh ambil do a quick photo session. Maybe everyone can briefly turn on your video and to see all the nice and wonderful faces of UTM staff. Maybe Dr. Hidayat would like to see some of you. Maybe she has known before during your school days in UTM. I remember one of my friends, Dr. Hidayat from FAE. He told me that he was your student in mathematics during his first year in UTM.
I have actually. There are several lecturers at UTM who used to be my students.
I see. Are they here right now?
I'm not sure they are here in this session.
Okay, right. I can see faces. Dr. Malizam, thank you very much. Dr. Nasaruddin. Okay, so Isham, can you have a quick photo capture the screen? Wait, Isham, can you lead the way? You just say 1, 2, 3 and then snap the screenshot. Isham, Isham.
Okay, 1, 2, 3.
Okay, smile. Okay.
One more. All right. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you
all right.
everyone.
So thank you very much.
Well-
Alhamdulillah. So terima kasih. Before we close, I want to thank you all, especially to our speaker here, Dr. Dara, who has has spent her very precious time and her precious knowledge on assessment. Yeah, I have a question. Question tadi. Tak ada? Tak ada. Okay, kau tak ada. Okay, so we will go. Thank you very much. We appreciate you being here. Before we end, don't forget to subscribe our Facebook page and our YouTube channel. Feel free to put in a comment on the reflection link that Mitra has put there in the chat, as well as a quick review form for this training. If you have any further comment or you would like to feel about this training, feel free to do so. And inshallah, we will take your suggestion for KAIS and we will improve that in the future. So with that, thank you again, Dr. Yudaria, for all your time as well as the knowledge that we have shared with us. And I hope that if you in the future, if you like to